Hello, Brandel.
Good. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Enjoying myself. One of my good friends from New Zealand, who's been at I don't know if you know, like Autodesk and Unity and things like that,
Yeah.
and Ubisoft. He wasn't there, and now he's finally uh, knuckled under and joined Apple to do things like that as well. So it's really fun. I'm really glad to
Nice.
have him on board, so he can do all sorts of silly things with water, which is what he used to do for fun.
That's great. Yeah, I know Autodesk, and I worked for as a knowledge manager for an architecture firm for 7 years, previous to jumping into the insurance industry, which is excruciatingly boring compared to the first industry.
There are some industries that are complicated, but then the things that they make, their bottom lines are extremely simple, and it's very weird to imagine the complexity of it. Insurance is kind of one, and another one that I was thinking about recently was pricing. Um, like how much you decide to charge for something is a complicated question with a very simple answer most of the time.
Yeah, I imagine it is. Yeah, the complexity in this for what they sell is mind-boggling, and the business model is really complex too. It's a storied organization. It's about 2,000 people. It's been around since the late 1800s. Um, so they've been around for a long time.
Wow.
And the home office, which is where I work in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they have about 2,000 heads that are working there. But then they have all these field offices, which are like essentially McDonald's franchises. Like people set up a franchise to sell just the products. I'm still wrapping my head around a contract as a product. Um, so they sign an agreement, and then they set up field offices, and then most of the work done at where I am is supporting the 14,000 strong field office employees, which aren't technically employees, but are just people that are selling the products that we make. And it's a very technology. They made a shift to like full digital back in 2015, and it made big news here, but they laid off hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that weren't ready to do that, like traditional insurance people, and hired hundreds and hundreds of engineers to take their place. So it's like working at a technology company, because we're there in all kinds of like agile scrums or whatever they are, and talking to software engineers all the time, but also it's got these traditional insurance people component that are in it. So it's an interesting environment.
It sounds it. It's the things that people do to make an organization be an organization. My friend who was at Autodesk said that there in the place where he was, there was 5 managers for 8 people, because it's Autodesk again. It's like fairly old as
Mhm.
companies go in the technology space, and so they've had a lot of time to kind of mix the different sort of cultural values, and what they've decided they believe in is lots of managers. Hey, Sonia. Hey, Sano.
Hi.
Hello.
Looking forward to chatting next week.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, my calendar has been just a little crazy.
No, I'm familiar with the situation. Oh, do we? Oh, it doesn't. No, it's there. Cool.
Mhm. I actually had a question for Dre, but I saw that he's not in the call yet. I saw his newsletters. I just signed up for them. And I wanted to ask if these are like a series of posts. Like, do they
If
come
this is
story
just
time?
the Design Fiction Daily, I don't know that he's had a particular point of view about the continuity between them. It's just a whatever gets a design fiction out on a daily basis. And so a good number of them have been just the product of this conversation where we've been talking, and he's just been like, that's going to be my design fiction daily for the day. So um, there may be a deeper and more nuanced logic behind it, but I think the point of it is that it's the minimum thing necessary for him to be able to kind of produce one once a day. He may have callbacks in it.
His design fiction dailies. It's great. It's like
Yeah.
going to Pilates every day or something.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by it as a process, and really excited that it's just helping kind of emphasize what design fiction is, and how achievable it is. Like, there are really high fidelity, high depth things. I think, like, the 2 copies of the TBD catalog I have are in very high rotation whenever I chance upon somebody who I want to explain things to. But yeah, these little sketches are also really awesome.
And there's a 10th anniversary edition of TBD catalog in production.
That's exciting. What does it entail? Does it have commentary on where the world was and where the world will be, or is it?
I'm just it's basically what it was. There's some like tweaks. There's it's just sort of more like technical things. Like I've got um I don't know. It's basically. I mean, if you already have one, and unless you want to have a collection of like all three, like the cover is totally different. It's just something. I was talking to Patrick about it. It's like the first two. I mean, I was very austere with the cover. I don't know what was. I kind of vaguely remember what was on my mind when I was doing it. I thought for some reason I thought it should be clean, even though it's messy. It should be messy, and so this next one is it's kind of it's beautifully mental, like the cover, and I do have to do some I will do a little bit of commentary thing um, with it, but part of it was like it kind of came up in my calendar. It's like 10th anniversary, I guess I'd put that in. I was like, I should do something, celebrate it.
I do like those sort of long-term calendar events. I think quite a few years must have put in most of my close friends like birthdays, and so that they pop up. And yeah, like I was talking to one of them whose 40th is tomorrow, and it was news to him. So it's like, that's good. Somebody, some machine somewhere remembered for you.
I know. It's like there's a little. It's not like a 60 hertz hum. I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out if it's the connector. This is just one of those fucking things.
For what it's worth, it does sound like it's gone now. Oh, no.
Now it's gone.
Yeah.
One of the conceits I use in like the futuring and writing and sort of speculative fiction I've been creating is that there is no Wi-Fi. It's a world without Wi-Fi. So we're back to cables everywhere.
Yeah, it's the cable. This is a bummer because it's like threaded through this thing. It's got
Sounds great now.
Does it sound better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very clear.
How do you fix that? I mean, if you have
Comes like that.
what? Well, this cable and this arm is threaded through. So,
Well, if you want to say goodbye, you can chop it into pieces, but otherwise, I'm not sure.
Oh, there's got to be a way
Take
to
it apart.
pull the
it's
cable
got
out of there.
there's got to be a way to rethread it, right?
Yeah.
Well,
It's
we
not-
say that. Like,
not like it's all-
one of those things where it's like you convince yourself, like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, who would? Why would
Would
anyone not do that? And you
Spot,
find
how
out-
to spot weld it, right? You know, and then just send it on its way. It's got to be
Yeah.
a screw somewhere.
What else is going on?
I was talking to people about the accessibility requirements for closed captionings on 3D models and on the internet, on the web, and the fact that when you have a video, you can have an audio track, and you can also have a text track that describes what's going on in the video. But when you have a 3D model, you can be looking at any part of it, and so you need probably a little bit more information about that, about what it is that the 3D model represents at any given moment. And so that was entertaining to try to figure out how deep and philosophical we have to go in order to solve that problem.
You like wicked problems, huh, Randall?
as wicked problems stack up, it's not probably the worst one, but it is interesting because I think 3D models are important, and so I think there will be a lot of things that they can do, and so I think that people will quickly choose to use them to do a lot of different things, and how many things, how well that those sort of cater to people's needs has a lot to do with how hard we can think about it today.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just saw it came through my my massive Google newsfeed alerts. Some researchers had developed a 3D printer that uses ultrasound to instantly create something based on a 3D model instead of printing it. That you just have whatever the medium is, and then ultrasound forms it, and then it sets, and then you have your thing, and they're using it for or they intend to use it for like 3D printing organs, like touchless 3D printing or something like that.
Oh, that's really cool. So you just have kind of some kind of nutrient bath or mixture,
It's
and then
essentially a replicator.
take it into existence.
Yeah, it's a replicator essentially.
Ultrasound 3D printer. That sounds awesome.
So Mia, how are things in the at your new workstation?
I'm still catching up. Yeah, it's been quite busy. But yeah, I'd love to set up a time with you and chat more about that sometime.
I'd love that. Let me send you
Okay.
an extra special link.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's 40 degrees here in Wisconsin, USA, so we've got the windows open.
Yeah.
Things are looking up.
Let the place air out a bit.
10 more
Thaw-
degrees and we're wearing shorts.
Thaw out the pipes. Yeah, the shorts say it's funny. I grew up back east, definitely not Wisconsin, but my brother went to school in Madison, and
Oh, okay.
I remember one time I visited him, and it was the first time I experienced something where they're like, literally, do not expose your skin. I was like, that's a joke. Like, no, seriously, don't. But here it's been cold here. I don't know. It's been up north, Brandon, to me, but it's been like, yeah, it's been like cold and like kind of sort of weather warnings. But there was you'll see people in shorts and a t-shirt, and you're like, oh, they're total European tourists. Like they're just kind of like, fuck it, we're in California. God damn it, if I'm gonna wear this shirt that my Hawaiian shirt, whatever. Sporty.
Yeah, I got a buddy in Koreatown and he had to buy his first space heater this year. He's never had one before. So I was giving him technical specs on how to run a space heater, but he ended up burning his hands anyway. So and then I got a buddy in Tucson and they got like 4 inches of snow yesterday. Sending me pictures. They like people that don't even know how to wipe off their windshields. They're just wiping off the part where they can see out of. Going around trying to crash into people.
I think just having lived in Seattle for 2 years and then about 1 year in Boston, now when I see rain and cold in California and I wear some extra layers, I feel like those people would probably like judge me now. They'd be like, we prepared you for this. You've seen far worse. Now you're just acting pricey.
Nothing brings a community together like talking about the weather.
Sumia, did you get that link?
Yes, I did. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. Yeah. So what's going on over here? So I've been like totally grinding on this next book project. Had like the fictional deadline of the end of February, which was Tuesday. But I was like, that was a short month. I'll give myself a few days. And then Patrick's been helping. He's amazing with this stuff. Where I can be a tricky person to manage because it's like you can, it's almost like where worlds collide. Like he's like and I'm not naive to it. Like I get it. Like I'm not unfamiliar with this world by any means. I mean, I've dealt with like very like a design sensibility where it's like no, it's got to be on the grid. I get it. I mean, but if you look at like the Amida, like that is all, it's all about Nold and Kerned and just try to get everything. It's like all the dimensions and all the relations between the dimensions totally. And also at the same time, I'm kind of like, man, I was doing that for a long time. And so part of me is just kind of like, get the rattle can out. Like we're going to paint this house. And he's kind of like, no, yes, that's how you do it. But like I've been writing and laying it out, doing the book design and the writing almost simultaneously, which is a little bit bonkers. But I'm like, fuck, that's just how I'm doing it, and not in a kind of way where I'm like trying to punish anyone or just be reckless. But it's like, all right, well, I don't mean this in an asshole way, but it's like my book and my process.
If you got to flow, you got to follow that. I mean,
Exactly.
chase
Yeah.
that.
And don't stop and don't let all the
Right.
kind of like, well, I don't know, you're a little bit,
Yeah.
should be this actually this is the way to do it. It's like, what do you mean I did it the way I did it? Like, how is
Yeah.
there another way that
Yeah.
I would do it?
I-
But I need the nudge, and he does it in a way that sometimes, collaborators I've worked with in the past are just unhelpful to the point where now it's like I'm very sensitive to it. And when I feel that, I'm just like, stop. We're not working through your problems here. We're working through mine. um so but he gets that, and so I think so far we work well together. But so he's like, here's a grid that you could work with, and this will just kind of bring things. I was like, okay, good, this is helpful, because I recognized that there's something off, and I know what my process was, and it's just like I was just throwing all the parts in a box, and then we'll take it into the machine room and get them all evened out or whatever. I just needed to get everything in there. So it was good that way. And then so I just been like spending all this time like essentially like in a 48-hour jujitsu match with like InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop and linkages between them. Like it's like, oh wait a minute, I thought I already turned that image CMYK. Like, why is it now back to RGB? Kind of experiences. Yeah, so that's what I mean. The other day, when was it? Thursday, I think. It's like I was messing around with this, like, wonder what time it is, and it was like after midnight. It's like, man, fucking, I've been doing this for 18 hours just to try to get this thing done, and at the same time finish. Yeah, I would sort of like divert off into like TBD catalog, like in the middle of working one thing, all of a sudden I'm in another project. I'm like, how did that happen? Like, how did I move? How did I get over there? Um, but it's been I'm excited. I'm excited to get. We're gonna have like a good queue of projects. We'll have the reader's guide to drop, and the next printing of the manual, and TBD catalog, and then if I can get my shit together to do this, the Android thing with Jed's electric sheep project, we'll have like a nice little slightly sad folding table at the LA Art Book Fair. Step over here, check it out. Soap with a prize inside. Try your hand at the bottle throw.
Yeah, collaboration could be tricky. One of his name is Steve on the Discord. He threw something in the shill and share of some fiction. And he was asking for critiques, and it's collaboration and critiques can be really tricky. And I've learned the hard way to ask them what level they want the phaser on.
Right.
Because
Yeah. Yeah. And that question comes, and I get it now. That's part of the ritual, and it's like, what volume of hots? How many chilies do you want? And what are your preferred pronouns? It's like
Yeah.
you got to get all that stuff ironed out ahead of time.
Yeah, I've made that mistake. I was telling Brando, I used to work in a architecture firm, and there was this one fellow who had made a career specializing in specification. So that's like all he did, and he was like the master, like renowned master at writing spec. And if just to give you an idea into his personality, and like I had heard from like VPs that had been there for like 20 years, it's like, yeah, what, just as like learning, not like talking behind his back or anything, but just like learning about the culture. It's like, yeah, we didn't know what to do with him when he got here, and until he found specifications. So that like that's how detail oriented he was. And then he was writing a like some sort of PowerPoint thing for an idea management initiative I was hosting, and he asked me for a critique, and I gave it to him, and like I almost killed the guy. Like it's like I gave him so many notes, and like I didn't realize his personality was okay. I have to act on every one of these notes. So, so ever since then, I've tried to couch my it's like ask them what level they want the phaser on first. Well, the weather must be nice everywhere else because nobody's in office hours. That's how you can tell how the weather's shaping up in the different parts of the world. Who doesn't make it to the lunchtime meeting?
Well, there's snow on the mountains in the Bay Area. There was snow behind the Hollywood sign earlier this week. I
Oh
don't know if
yeah, it
it's
was
still
like
there.
you could totally see the snow just looking just get it going Venice Boulevard and look like whatever 60 miles east.
So maybe it's a snow day, but
It's variable. Last week, what was it? We went 3 hours.
yeah.
I checked out Samuel's um apparatus when was that, Sam? It was like last Friday. Was it Friday? I think it was Friday.
Yeah, that was Friday. Sorry, I'm working from a cafe today because I've got work going on. There's construction going on at my apartment, so it might be loud background music. But yeah, that was Friday. Cool to have you out, man.
Yeah, it was fun. Holographic display technology.
Yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned it here before, but working on like holographic displays meets fitness.
That's cool. Is it like a Pepper's Ghost illusion holographic display? Is it
It's a autostereoscopic
structured light?
display.
Oh yeah. Lenticular or
Lenticular sheet combined with eye tracking to handle head motion parallax, right? So stereoscopy through the lenticular sheet and then eye tracking for the parallax.
that would be nice. Because there's so much you can do with autostereoscopy without eye tracking, but knowing that gives you a lot more about where somebody is.
Yeah, it's really like it's such an old technology. Like a lot of AR VR technology has its roots like all the way back in the 90s, like Pepper's Ghost, right? Which goes even further back. But it's what's amazing is how much it changes when it becomes quite good. Like we now have 4K displays. We have really good eye tracking, high refresh rate. So I feel like we'll start to see more of these come into play.
Definitely. I saw a concept that I think NVIDIA didn't even succeed in building a dynamic display behind, but it was sort of a bidirectional lenticular grid that allowed people to create very, very high resolution transfers, like sheets, and then because it was creating basically a planoptic volume of rays, then you could actually, it was effectively varifocal. You had the ability to kind of focus and fixate on things at different apparent distances because of the light travel of the rays and from all of those different things. And it was just incredible because one, it was like better than like, so the idea is that instead of having a grid of pixels, you had a grid of really tiny pixels and then basically kind of a water droplet, a lens focusing each one. And so then you would get different colors coming from different directions. And where those happen to be in combination with each other would make apparent images be able to be focused at different depths, depending on what you did with your eye lens.
Very cool.
But it meant that, so for like a couple inches, you needed like 64,000 pixels by 64,000 pixels. And
wow.
nobody can do that. So they're like, this is interesting. Yeah, never mind. Forget I said anything. That's awesome.
Yeah, like there's proper light field displays that like NVIDIA has been developing, right? Where the amount of light loss you get from that is crazy. You need to just like each inch has to be like several hundred pixel resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a great, if you're in the business of wasting lumens and also compute cycles, then it's a great thing to do.
Great technology.
Yeah.
It's cool. I'd be curious to, do they have a research paper out?
I will look it up. I mean, I was just looking up light field displays, and there's a company that does prints of them. But there was a similar thing like that in terms of the photographic stuff. I have to look around for the sort of signal that I was on looking at that. It was about 2017, 18.
Yeah,
back,
that'd be cool.
back when people were meeting in person. But yeah, really fun. I've often said that, like, I think that a really important part of technology development is people who can kind of countenance the possibility of wasting stuff, even worse than is currently wasted. And so people who can waste processor cycles, or people who can waste pixels, or people who can waste IMUs and things like that. That's the way that you sort of advance the technology. And one of the reasons why the United States was able to, leap ahead in comparison to other countries is that computing in the UK got really efficient. People were able to figure out how to use every last piece of the compute buffalo, whereas people in the United States were like, what if we just like used it as though it was a typewriter? And yeah, and so the one sort of feels existentially satisfying to be able to be a good craftsperson, but the other one provides a clear kind of value and need for people to produce more latent capability but not below you, so that you can kind of get on with doing your task. And so I've grudgingly come to accept the sort of the hope and expectation of wastefulness.
Yeah, it's interesting. It ties into something I was thinking a lot about when I was starting to get into holographic displays. Is I think the interesting thing about like the past 20, 30 years of computing was all about who could get the most, take Moore's law and turn that into human value. I think we're going through a similar thing with GPUs, right? Is you've got this overwhelming abundance of GPU compute capacity, and whoever can harness that and create really human value is really well positioned to lead technology in the future. Of course, I mean, like, AI is one side of that, but AR, VR, immersive technology is the other side of that coin, right?
Yeah, definitely. I just feel like, and I've run to Sumia already about this, like, I feel like we are at the limits of what we can do with graphics pixels because we're at the limits of our imagination of what is display. But
Yeah.
if you can start sort of throwing light around and call it display in slightly more wasteful ways, then we can start transforming our spaces in a way that's interesting and can soak up some of those compute cycles as well.
Yeah.
I really just want animated wallpaper in my house as well as on my desktop.
Yeah, which sounds like crazy right now, but it's kind of like you're gonna have so much compute in the future, like where I mean the current generation of GPUs is at least double the previous generation, and that hasn't stopped. In fact, it seems to be accelerating. So yeah, exactly, like whatever your mind can fancy is pretty much possible.
Hey, Thomas.
Hello.
Ahoy.
I'm good. Yeah. Late start today, but we're here. I went to an artist talk with I think his name's Jim Campbell. He like did this top of Salesforce tower, but he like worked in displays a lot. I think in like the 90s when people were trying to figure out how to make things HD. And then he created a whole art practice that was like going the other direction. So he would make like a 8 pixel by 8 pixel display and then like see how little information eyes needed to like figure out what they were actually looking at. His most of his stuff is a lot more interesting than what's on top of Salesforce because it's like asks a lot more of the viewer. He said that Salesforce is his least favorite thing he's ever done. But
He said that while he was talking at Salesforce.
not at Salesforce, at a little art school.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of I think what you guys said about displays and like imagination, like that was one of the few. I don't necessarily know how imaginative it is because it's like just like lo-fi, but he's certainly pushing lo-fi to the limits in a lot of his work, which is kind of fun. Like he's figured out how few pixels we need to actually discern what an image is, and then he'll like push past it.
It's interesting that he's aware that the Salesforce project isn't his best work, because I've always felt his other work is so much more interesting than that. I think partially because he doesn't control exactly the content on the Salesforce.
That was what he said, was like, it was, I forget what it was. Maybe there were like all these power outages in San Francisco, and it had just happened. And like, they were like, oh, can you make a graphic that we can like display on this huge thing that uses a bunch of electricity that says like, call this number if you have a power outage? And he was like, shouldn't we just turn this thing off? Like,
yeah. That's hilarious. I guess that's a good business, right? He's got this perpetual client that always needs his help. Artists have to make a living.
Yeah, he had some nice takes on like public art versus not, and like kind of the creative struggle of that. He's like, you don't get full agency over your work when you're making it for a space and you're being commissioned, which I think can be hard. But it's pretty cool. I think he makes cool stuff for sure.
Yeah, I'm really taken by that. The limits of the fidelity aspect of it is something that I was thinking about when Camille a while ago was talking about the 17 points of light. There was a presentation many years ago about saying that that's the minimum number for recognizing a person. But the thing about that was that there were 17 dots, but they were sort of presented with sort of arbitrarily high spatiotemporal resolution, and that like there were dots, but they were moving around as though they were in a much higher fidelity place, because they were literally like points that were encoded to a person, so that you weren't interpolating across a lower resolution grid and things like that. And like so that means that you can get expression from that, but if you had to reduce that down to say a 30 by 30 pixel array, then it's recognizable but differently. So, but also that like you could imagine displays being presented with a low number of points but a really high spatial resolution for where those points exist. Like, have you ever heard of the Vectrex? It was so all computer screens, starting with cathode ray tube systems, have a pixel grid. And on a cathode ray tube system, that's achieved by having a rastrum, a line that is being dragged across the screen and activating the sort of the quantized cells, the pixels, on the screen. But a cathode ray tube, like in an oscilloscope, can be dragged in any direction at any point. And so the Vectrex was a system where instead of drawing a line by line by line like that, it just drew the lines in the directions that you wanted them to be. And so you ended up with perfectly crisp vector shapes in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and people made video games where you were actually drawing these infinitely sharp lines across the surface of the thing. And what happened is if you drew too many, then it would end up slower because it would be too long from the beginning of the display cycle to the end of it. But it meant that there was a fundamentally different sort of technology underpinning what it was that display was, and it was pretty. I've never seen one in real life, so I don't know how pretty, but yeah, I really like that, and the idea that you could have that could have been the way that display went, and so that you would have vector shapes being kind of constantly redrawn, but at an infinite resolution, would have been an interesting thing to play with as the underpinning kind of display strategy. And it's kind of reminds me of looking at Jim Campbell's work of the way that people do display with quad rotor, drones up in the sky and fireworks and stuff like that. And you have a low number of pixels, but they have infinite spatiotemporal resolution, and that they're actually physically moving from one space to another in order to represent the objects that they represent. So yeah, we have options, and some of them are silly in different ways.
Very cool. Especially, I mean, like stuff like that in the context of the new wave of Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. It's so interesting. Artists kind of limiting their tool set down to like the absolute most minimal. And yeah, it kind of speaks to like, okay, can we just reduce everything to the minimal tools you need to convey the idea?
It's definitely a different way of looking at things. Like, I feel like right now it's like throw as much information as possible at whoever's looking at it, which is a great way to, well, I guess in some ways it's like easy to make things like quite obvious, but it doesn't, the more abstract you make something, that this isn't necessarily true, but it can make things a little bit more, can create a little bit more like thought or questioning of what is actually going on, I feel like.
Yeah, it's almost like, kind of what I was like, a friend was putting out a newsletter for, he runs a investment fund. And of course, threw in a prompt to ChatGPT to generate this kind of newsletter. And it made me think, oh, like probably the future is just sending the prompt, right? Like skip the ChatGPT, we're just going to send the prompts. And I think if you take that and apply it to visual art, yeah, skip the rendering. Just how can you send the idea directly?
Yeah, many years ago, and I really wish I knew what it was. I found a paper or an opinion piece by it was like the head of AI at some university, and he sort of characterized, or maybe head of psychology. He characterized the sort of process of artificial intelligence as one of fundamentally data compression, just like what is the minimum thing, and kind of one of the things that he talked about there and I've heard before is that data compression depends on having a common frame of reference for people or participants on either side of a divide, and then being able to send the minimum impulse. That so like code books in World War II or code machines were a way of doing that, but having some common shared set of experiences means that you can reduce those things, because the better you know somebody, the better you know how to trigger those memories and download things. But yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, so like, but that can be taken in all number of ways, and the way that you generate that common frame of reference. So if everybody has the same multi-terabyte file on their computer, then you can just say like, look up page 2,237,463,210. But yeah, like, or you can have a latent space generator that you can kind of navigate in that same way. But yeah, you can do a lot of things with that sort of common system. You can look at the bytes, or you can generate the bytes, or whatever.
What's the lab at? I'm blanking on his name, at Stanford. The AR VR lab. Jeremy Bailenson.
Yes. Yeah.
He's done a lot of really interesting work on where that, and research on similar idea is how can you transmit an idea to a broad demographic where the context is totally different, but this idea has adapted to the context automatically. So similar thing, one technique is, and this already happens. So when if you're a politician in Latin America, say, they'll regularly change their skin tone on the billboards to match the region where they're campaigning. So you'll see, if you're up in the highlands of Peru where the skin tone is darker, there's less Spanish heritage, you might see politicians go with a darker skin tone and then Photoshop it a little bit lighter when they're campaigning down in the lowlands.
That's fascinating. I know I was talking to a guy who works on the image analysis for Memoji, and he was saying that there's quite a wide variety of people's kind of self-reported skin tones versus the sort of camera feed ground truth, where in different countries that often it often sort of relates to the level of racial inequality in a place. People will bias their skin tone more pale based on preferences, and so like in Latin America, it's not as pronounced, but in North America it can be, and in India, it's quite pronounced that people will sort of elect to identify themselves as having a more pale skin tone relative to what the camera picks up, based on that. And so yeah, it'd be interesting to hear whether that you could find actual context dependent sort of factors, not that somebody would choose like a party time, like if people would choose like a party times one, or what, that the fact that they're quantized in many ways means that it would be likely to anchor people's choices. But if there was something that didn't give them the opportunity to have an objective thing, you'd probably be able to see some sort of slightly more jitter in it. Or if you were to provide friction against it to make it so like, are you sure you want to go this light? I don't know. Then yeah, it'd be interesting to see where people's kind of responses go with it.
It's fascinating.
No, colorism in Mexico is really pronounced. Maybe for the rest of Latin America, but in Mexico, and among Mexican American community, it's very pronounced.
Yeah, I spent a year and a half traveling through South America, and including a little bit in Mexico. It's definitely the interesting thing is, there's of course in all these countries a wide variety of skin tones, but how it is accepted and presented is very different. So, for example, especially like Cuba is known for kind of having a high preference for lighter skin tones. And so that one idea about like, if you're a politician trying to promote yourself in a certain area, whether you want to be perceived as reflective of the population or whether you want to be perceived as somehow, reflective of an elite population, is a decision. Yeah. So, how populism works and how much you want to be reflective of the people you're campaigning for is a very interesting area.
Yeah, I'm interested in how, we don't have many visible augmentations or changes that we can have to ourselves yet. I mean, people can dye their hair. That's doesn't have much of a functional difference. There was an interesting sort of process of social evolution in mainland China with the uptake of spectacles, corrective glasses, and things, because at first nobody could afford them, and so they didn't have many, and then they became possible to have, and so lots and lots of people had glasses, and then contact lenses and LASIK surgery have kind of applied, and so then it means that glasses becomes increasingly lower status, so like the status interactions of those modifications and the visibility of them, like was sort of notable. They're slightly more enduring than like the kinds of cell phones that people have, but if and when people have to do more sort of obvious things to themselves in order to be able to achieve certain ends, then we'll probably see it roll through again.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, even just like in some cultures where glasses are perceived as smart and intellectual, and that's desirable. And in other, just even within the US, other parts of the US, nerdy, unrelatable, not sporty, right? So, when it comes to like something like advertising, right? We haven't even gotten into that level of granularity of advertising that can understand those demographic social cues, but it's coming.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. That reminds me. So when we launched Apple Watch Series 3, I made a 3D model of a swimmer, so that you could kind of scroll down the page, and it was this whole complicated thing. But what it let me do was have to be involved with every variant that we had for all of the different markets. Oh, wow. And so in conservative Muslim countries, you can't have, obviously women aren't allowed to wear stuff that shows much of their body, but men also aren't. They're supposed to wear, ankle to shoulder, ankle to wrist clothing, or more modesty anyway. Modesty in general is sort of good for everybody. And so people had to Photoshop on like a rash suit to the texture map that I had of the sky. But yeah,
no
thinking
way.
about
that's fascinating.
the opportunity. Yeah, it was cool. It was crazy because like there were a lot of bubbles, and so that somebody had to take off the bubbles and then put them on the rash suit and then put the bubbles back on. And so yeah, like just it was a lot of work. As all things in Apple marketing, as it turns out. But like thinking about the fact that there would be different characteristics in terms of glasses wearing and things like that, and just being able to kind of tailor like exact archetypes and images within people's marketing to just them is pretty interesting and appealing in terms of how it balances like pure fan service of being like, it's actually just you and all of the ads for something versus kind of trying to achieve something that's understood to be more abstract or general or aspirational. But it would be funny for all of the ads that you see on the internet to just have you.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if I'm comfortable seeing I'm like very uncomfortable seeing photos of myself. Like so personally, that's me. So I wonder if, but there's people who love seeing photos of themselves. So yeah, I wonder like, how do you understand that? And can AI, I guess, through what people click on, you're going to start seeing like yourself in a photo. If you avoid it or click on it, is the tell.
All I can think of is
Yeah.
being John Malkovich. Like the internet's going to turn into being John Malkovich. So all the ads are going to have you in them, and everything that you, everything you view, all the people in there, it's going to be like the Aphex Twin covers for his early albums.
Yeah, I was thinking Windowlicker. Yeah, just everybody is you. I would like to play with that. I think that's really silly. I mean, the thing about it is that what if an algorithm like that, which worked well enough, which they definitely won't for the foreseeable future, then what it would end up is what your sort of idealized image is, and the delta between that and what you are like would be, and in places kind of just people tweaking and tucking here and there, and then some places it's just like, well, your idealized self is actually an anime Easter bunny. So I don't know how we go Armani with this.
Yeah, I mean, with ControlNet that came out, I think last week it was very recently started making them rounds. You're almost at that point where you can have, like you were talking about for your Apple Watch ad, you can have that figure, the same figure, same shot, and then get fine-grained control over what you're changing in the AI generated image.
Yeah. That's really funny. That's really funny.
Yeah, that's like a whole new level of personalized ads.
The Verge reported on the late sort of all hands at Meta of the sort of their technology roadmap for the next 4 years or so. And one of the things that they said at the end of it was that they're very much looking forward to being able to capture conversations. We should be able to run a very good ads business. I think it's easy to imagine how ads would show up in a space where you have AR glasses on. Our ability to track conversation, it's just conversions, not conversations. That ruins the entire thing. I thought it was the ability to track conversations, which has been a lot of focus as a company, should be as close to 100%. But I was just, so that was a misreading on my part. But where it took me was the idea that based on the quality of their conversation tracking, they would be able to make ads for everybody. But yeah, like that would mean that like knowing exactly how somebody's face looked and like in real time would mean that every surface could be a mirror, every banner could be a reflection, not just of how you looked, but how you were being and what you were talking about. And that would be quite dizzying, but also somewhat flattering, being like in a hall of mirrors. And yeah.
There's like a good scene in Minority Report. I think it's after he gets his eyeball switched. He's like walking through and they're like, hey, and instead of saying, well, his name's not Tom Cruise, but instead of calling him Tom Cruise, they call him like some Chinese name, as he's walking through, and it's like, what? Because they're scanning his eyeball to like target him.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we kind of already have echo chambers, but echo chambers are the ideological companion to mirror chambers, would you call it? So you've got an echo chamber and a mirror chamber combined, and that completes your bubble.
Yeah, yeah. I've often thought of like really enjoyed the idea that that like a high traffic space would be a mirror chamber to the most notable or highest bidder, which is what happens at expensive high flying parties, is that whoever is the center of attention is whoever happens to be the most powerful or interesting person in the room, and so the sort of the buzz changes to be about them. But that could be reflected in the decor as well as in the demeanor of all of the people around them. And so then like you'd end up with like visible turf wars as like sort of the relative encoded influence of people in Times Square changes. So that like, Times Square is all about this one person driving through, but then it changes as a consequence of a new challenger in town.
That's really interesting. It kind of, yeah, like, I always think of, not all artists, but a lot of artists can create the sense of bringing you into their world and seeing things from their perspective. I wonder if that becomes even more valuable in the future. This ability to bring someone out of their mirror chamber into the artist.
What projects is everybody working on? I'm super curious. I don't know who's dug into what, where everybody's tentacles are.
I can share
Yeah.
a rough
that'd be good.
layout of Green Pages.
Do,
kind of
do you know about
Oh.
Green Pages? I mean, you've probably
I-
seen or heard, but maybe.
I've seen or heard, but I don't know like the whole remit or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
So
Maybe an overview, Thomas. We can do.
Yeah, we're putting together a publication of kind of design fictions about the future of filmmaking.
Oh, okay.
The idea is that it's kind of like some like industry publication that we are where we're, I guess, like producers, big shots would have this on their office table, and it's like, oh, we have all the secrets of where film is going. I'll share my screen though. We've been playing with different formats, so not all the ads are perfectly fitting to this particular one, but I think it was cool to put them all into an InDesign document. Dre designed this sweet logo, and I haven't actually added. We've kind of created this world around this speculative film or design fiction film called The Line, which is set at the line in Saudi Arabia. I haven't added those ads in quite yet, but this is all formatted in 16:9. And then we have like a bunch of these were from an old version, so they're not ready, they're not formatted perfectly for this template, but I think they certainly give a sense of the kind of ads that we're making. So we have like different equipment and services, I guess, like this is maybe in the realm of software. And then we have ads for different movies that we're making, or that have been made. And then this is like another technology type thing, advertisement, and we have an industry news section that I've been working on, just like quick hits of industry news. I like this Warner Brothers one because it's like them getting rid of all their studio space and place for real-time rendering farms. So like the whole like Warner Brothers experience where you're riding around on golf carts around the set, and there are like 4 of them, is over because there's nothing to see there. But they've like transformed all of that.
Good apartments now. I mean, what did they do with the studios?
They're filled with computers that are like
Oh, got it.
generating content for them. And this is an article that Florian wrote about kind of a similar deal, where this guy is kind of the person who, after a while, AI filmmaking kind of got repetitive, and this guy was able to kind of unlock new ways of making.
I think it's already happened.
Yeah.
That's present.
Yeah.
Near present problem there.
But yeah, it's just like a collection of different
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
advertisements and long form and short form writing. It's
Where
kind
does
of,
where does the writer sit in this near future? Is it all the scripts are written by algorithms? There's no
this one.
Flannery O'Connor type writer sitting with his mint julep, banging out scripts anymore.
I think Dre is working on a kind of, we've been kind of in our conversations been kind of taken by this idea of kind of like live filmmaking. So almost like you're a VJ or like a DJ mixing, but for filmmaking, and there's like narrative involved, because one of Dre's friends, one of his cool friends, he has a lot of those, was able to integrate Stable Diffusion into Touch Designer, which is like a video generating software. And so like as Touch Designer is making cool images, the guy could type in a prompt to Stable Diffusion, and that would go into the live video. And so we started talking about like live filmmaking. So one of where like you're in front of an audience and they're looking at this screen, but instead of it, playing a movie that's pre-recorded, the director is actually making the film in real time, kind of reacting to what the audience is reacting to. And so that one is like, writing is totally changed, because you're still like writing, but it's more like improv or something. And then there's also, we're trying to speculate on like what the new final version of Final Draft would be like, which is like the kind of industry standard script writing software. So I think I flashed that ad for a second, but like that ad that I last showed was called like the Quick Script, which is a piece of technology that studios started buying to like bring people back into the writer's room, but you would just like, and you would like physically insert prompts into this, I don't know, like printer, and then it would like actually print out physical scripts. And this is all in an effort to like recreate the writer's room while embracing embracing new technology. There's a lot of, it's kind of fun. We meet on Tuesdays and sometimes Fridays to talk, and it's fun because it's just like a big brainstorm session, and then people come back with ads or writing, but it's kind of like a never-ending universe. Like Julian and I were talking, and it was like a lot of our ads are about AI right now. Like, does it make sense to have ones that maybe suggest a world of filmmaking that doesn't really use AI? And then it was like, well, maybe it's like today where there's still these like old school people who want to shoot on film or whatever, that just because AI is being used doesn't mean there aren't people who want to use, old filmmaking techniques because it's, more true to the art or something. So
What would David Lynch do? That'd be my bumper sticker. Like, would he embrace it, or would he? Because I know he finally said, I'm never doing movies ever again. And then he's like, it's all digital from here on out. So what would he do with the, I think he'd probably be all on board with every ad in your Great Pages. He's got complete control. Imagine a David Lynch film where he's up there prompting live for, based on the audience. I don't know if I'd walk out of that theater.
I think people might. I wouldn't be able to give my brain to him in that way.
I like the idea of a mass improv though. That's why I sort of came in late there, but in that sense, that would be fascinating to see that.
Yeah, if you had like the equivalent of like film's equivalent of like the Miles Davis quintet. It's sort of interesting. Like if there were different roles, like there was one person is like DP, someone else is sound. It's almost like you've seen the old videos of when they do Foley sound, and they'll be on a big sound stage with the bags of potato chips for snow or all that kind of stuff, and they're looking at the thing like, and now you pop pop pop, because the door closed. It'd be amazing.
I used to listen to those old radio shows. Yeah.
And totally. It was like, I think I had like a record that was just sound effects. It was just like 16 track, like little. Yeah, that sounds like I don't know what I was doing. I was just kind of feeling into like making these worlds with a record player. I think I got the album from Radio Shack. I wonder if it's in this Radio Shack catalog from 59th anniversary. Oh, they're already onto computers now. High-powered programmable with advanced features.
It would open up a new form of celebrity, because all of a sudden the people are like actor, director, sound deep. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, like, the roles that these people would have or be filling out.
Imagine doing like a giant switch, like everybody like shifts over one role at the same time, like if they do an improv where you have to change roles suddenly.
And then like, what are you? Go ahead.
There's a VR game where everybody is on the bridge of a starship, and they have lots of different things that they need to do on their different panels and things. And so people have played the sort of, and they're mostly doing symmetrical things. So each person has customized, but sort of equivalent sort of control panel. But you could have sort of quite fundamentally different roles that they're performing in terms of the way that they have to attend to certain pieces of data or the way that they need to move their body for it. But yeah, and it would be fun to do.
I kind of wonder what you would it be like at an opera where you can't see the orchestra, because like, what would you be watching? Like, I'm fascinated by what these people would actually be physically doing, but then there's like a movie to watch as well.
Well, be like, sometimes they'll have the live orchestra. So I've drawn to that, like at the Hollywood Bowl, where it's like John Williams they're gonna do the soundtrack for Jaws. Like, hell yeah, I'm going to that. Yeah. And the orchestra is just down below, and they've got the big screen. And
they do that here in Calgary now regularly, because I think they lost a lot of people going to the orchestra. I used to just sleep in the orchestra up in the balcony or read. But I like that idea. We do it here. I haven't been to one yet. It'd be good.
The Stanford Laptop Orchestra did a laptopera last year, where they have a whole bunch of people who create granular synthesis instruments, and then they have personal speakers next to each other, next to themselves. And so you end up with people sort of creating multidimensional performance sound, but it's arbitrary in the sense that they don't have to be, it's not being made with any sort of physical acoustics. And so then what kind of instrument they happen to be playing is up to them, and how they decided to program it. And so that's fun. I missed their opera last year, but I've gone to a couple of their chamber music performances, and it's fun. It's silly because most musical instruments have remained relatively static for several hundred years, as has the training for them, and that's why people know how to make good sounds out of them. And so, if you're asking undergrads to invent an instrument and the way to play it, then 99% of it is bad. But it's a really interesting thing to play with.
Very sounds like a perfect design studio. Yeah.
I wanted to say, Thomas. So you were talking about the way that like the backlot of the movie studios is data centers. Do you know what happened to Manhattan with high frequency trading?
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah.
so people hollowed out. Yeah. So Julian probably knows where I'm going with it. Like computers run at the speed of light, right? But they all run at the speed of the light. And so things that are closer to where the action is happening get to talk faster than things that are further away. And so high frequency trading firms bought entire hotels, emptied them out, and filled them with data centers so that they could be milliseconds, sometimes microseconds closer to the actual trading floor or the logical position of it in order to be able to get the best possible latency profile for their predatory high frequency trading algorithms. And so like location still matters in an electronic world, and but the way it matters and the reason for which it matters is slightly different. But that's something that you could use to play with, like where locations are and where people be in relation to processing power and big data in order to be able to get the best performances and stuff like that. So you could have, and so you might have, if a performer is augmented or something like that, then they may have a data entourage that needs to be moved closer to the set. And it might be, instead of having, just the one truck that they hang out in, they might have to have a substantial amount of big iron behind them, or you have different places where the performance profile of this particular person's like lighting capability is off because their data is being processed that much further away and things. So there are all sorts of ways that both the actual performance of it in terms of the quality of what happens, but also like the power games that come from who gets to have their stuff parked where can come into it a lot. So it could be a fun thing to play with in the context of Hollywood sort of backlot politics.
Yeah, that's fun. It's nice to like make these, I don't know, like a data center full of computers making movies feel so clean. So it's nice to kind of like dirty it up, and still like the film industry is so chaotic, and it's, in a lot of ways it feels ridiculous to think that it would ever be less chaotic, or like not, there's always going to be problems. We just like don't know what they are yet. So that's just, yeah. I really like this idea.
There's somebody who famously quoted that if you're going to do this, you gotta figure out all the problems, all the dirty stuff, which I think fits in nicely with what happens here in design fiction.
Yeah, another thing that happened in Wall Street that was interesting with that is that in order to counter all of this, there's a Canadian guy who has he started something called Investors Exchange, which is a separate stock exchange that effectively bans high frequency trading. And the way that he did that is by having a shoebox full of 300 miles of fiber optic cable that everybody's routed through, which adds a minimum of so many milliseconds of latency to every trade, so that nobody has the ability to be any faster than that. But the way that you can't fake that, you can't build an electronic thing for it. So they physically have this 300 miles of cable in the shoebox in order to prevent it. And so if you have traditionalists who are trying to sort of change the latency profile, then you got to do weird shit to it, like wasting fiber optic cable on set.
What an artifact though to see like a stack of shoe boxes.
Yeah, it's
Just a
gotta be
shoebox.
these like
Nothing
giant
fancy.
spools.
Yeah, we wrap it around those big power line spools.
Yeah.
Funny. I was amazed to find out the 5G is all that's all it is just a density of devices with full throughput. That's all it is. No new technology or anything. Just density. And hence shortening distances.
I found the screenshot of it. They call it the speed bump.
Love it.
The thing that slows down all of the internet traffic for it. That's funny.
It definitely looks like it looks like a tool for sure. I really, I really, when you said shoebox, I was like, oh, there's like a Nike symbol on it.
I was thinking the same thing.
That might have been the early prototypes. I remember the person describing it in a documentary at some point as a shoebox. So maybe they got an upgrade after that in order to be able to kind of have people trust them as running a stock exchange.
Yeah, looks more professional. Still, I prefer the vision of all these shoeboxes stacked up with coils. Pretty funny. Like high tech defeated the lowly shoebox.
Definitely room for an ad. For
Yeah.
this,
You're taking
for
notes,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that's like one fun thing about this whole project is it's like we'll write about something and then we'll talk about something and then someone will write about it and then like an advertisement or two will pop up. So like the publication becomes this kind of like interconnected web of, if you look at it, if you read it, you'll be able to like look at this ad and wonder what it is and then like read about it and learn a little bit more and then flip 2 more pages and there will be another ad that kind of gives you more information about it. So it's kind of been a fun process of making because any idea, there's like 3 ideas kind of stem from it, which it's been a fun process.
Say that, and that's where I keep coming back to improv.
Yeah.
Mostly because one day I don't have the, if I ever get up and try it sometime, but it just seems like you talk about brainstorming, right? And people like kind of dismiss brainstorming as it was, but with improv, it's always about building upon, right? Building upon, and then seeing where it leads, and nobody tries to put the brakes on where it leads to. Which is where the hilarity comes, of course, because then it goes in really wacky places. But it just seems like an important part of the method. Attractive to me, anyway.
Is the book you're talking about, or is it from Flash Boys? Seems like
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the Lewis book. He talks about it, and the other thing that he mentions, which has come up before at the IEX as well, is that initially their website was going to be investorsexchange.com, but that's the same letters as investorsexchange.com, and so they had to change that in order to avoid people thinking that it was doing something that it wasn't doing, and it's an amusing sort of consequence of the way that like URLs destroy spacing unless you want to hyphenate and things like that. So it's also an entertaining trick with any sort of set of colliding words in URLs if they have to be important.
I'm thinking about making like a press kit for Green Pages. as like a little artifact, which I think could be fun as like another, while still adding to the larger thing.
What are those? What are press kits? It's like just saying, what is it?
It's kind of like if you are a journalist or something, you'd send, if you're a musician or a film, you send press kits to all the journalists so that they'll write about your thing. So it would come with like a CD and then like a story about what it is and whatever. Just like little, just like something to get you excited about writing about it or advertising for it, I guess
Okay.
is the idea.
Yeah.
I-
Some of the legwork for you too, like it gives you a bunch of copy and stuff and logos and things that so you don't have to like source all that. You just
Yes.
use it, I think. Yeah.
That's more of a, well, we'll see. I mean, we actually have, yeah, we have quite a bit of content. Like what I showed is maybe half of what we have. So, but I'm like, I'm in school right now, so I'm trying to like work this into projects that I'm doing at school, and
I love
and
that.
so like it's like, well, this is due in a week or two, so then I can't have the full book done, but maybe I could do a press kit, and you know, and then when the full thing comes out, hopefully soon, then that's like something that we add to be like the special edition. So instead of you get all these little knickknacks with it.
That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
but
One of my
you
favorite
can't, you
things.
can't intern in a Discord, Thomas.
I've been interning to myself for almost a year now, so
Guess you can.
yeah. I saw that and I started laughing because I was like, you're right. I think.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
proficiency. I used to do that too for especially my master's. I read a chapter before like an assignment for something else, and I'd write a chapter for my thesis as a twofer. So
Yes.
them both. Threefers were rare, but if I saw those, I'd never.
This could be. No, this isn't a threefer. No. They've kind of cracked down on that at my school. You have to like write a explanation about why your work that you're doing for 2 classes is like enhanced by using the 2 class, which I think is actually kind of it's not like a hard no. It's more just like, why does this make
Explain
sense
it.
to do?
Yeah. Nice.
Which is good, because then it's like, well, why would I talk to this professor? How could they help me? And how could this one help me? And it all.
You might cause collaboration or something.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just making it a little bit more thoughtful instead of just a reason to do less work.
Had 2 profs this university, business and computer science, and they did an illegal joint project between the students. They gamed it somehow, so they actually had to do a separate project, but they couldn't pass unless they had a component from the other team on the other faculty. But they didn't tell anybody. I don't know if the dean might have known, but they didn't tell the school basically. But what that they were making this class, because it would have been verboten to do something across faculties, which is just boggles my mind.
Yeah, when I was in university, we were running a game development course, and we were trying to get it so that it could be a co-credit for this design studies class along with the computer science class, but the design department would never get its shit together to be able to furnish us with students that would be able to draw graphics for a design UI, and so we all had to make do with programmer art. So it goes. One of my favorite parts, Thomas, of press kits, or not press kits, but media kits, is the branding guidelines document. You ever seen those for like Sony, PlayStation, or anything? They've got all of like the examples of what definitely not to do with their precious logo. Like don't put sparkles on it, for the love of God. And
what about an inner glow or a drop shadow?
Not if the blur radius is too much. You can't have a big blur radius.
Yeah. I just really like the idea of just going in on really elaborate, like, okay, and so if you if you have a drop shadow and a glow, and then you have it set in the center of a room, and then everybody is standing around in hoods, like that, definitely not that. And okay, and then if you're walking along the street and you see it up on the side of a building, and there's like a rotating pig kind of mechatronically, they're definitely not that either. Just the idea that somebody would be so obsessively imagining all of the terrible things you might be able to do with their branding. Perhaps not quite for green pages, but yeah.
But you
I
could
kind of
totally- you
do
could
like
totally-
it for green pages.
Yeah, you could totally mock that.
Patrick and I we've been talking about this actually, just as we're talking about like kind of like the site redesign and that kind of stuff, and it was actually, it came out of, well, it goes really deep, but I talked to this one guy, Greg Lindy, who's like LA kind of typographer, graphic designer, who I've been following for a while, and I usually get his stuff when he'll do like little drops of just like little zines and stuff, and I use some of his fonts. And we met for coffee, and we're talking, and then I was like, yeah, thinking, would you be interested in a commission to kind of do some rebranding of Near Future Laboratory? And so we had a coffee, and then we had like a long call, and I was just kind of talking. It was like kind of visual design, kind of just spewing my thoughts and ideas and that kind of stuff. He sort of sitting there patiently listening. He's kind of like, yeah, he's like, man, I really like this. This is the kind of project I'm always looking for. Like, because usually you get the thing where everything's so tight, and it's like, okay, you're a brand fascist, and you're a brand fascist, and you're a brand fascist. It's not fun. And so he said, this is beautiful. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me was, he's like, who says that has to be the same every time? And it was something around like the logo or something like that, and that really stuck with me, because I felt that, like, it wasn't like a new idea, but I also realized, like, forever you're challenged against that kind of thing. Like, you look at all the brand guidelines, like we're just describing, it's like this, and this is the yellow. And if it's yellow on screen, it's this, coded hex. If it's yellow printed, it's this. If you're going to use paint, it's that, all that kind of stuff, where it's like, okay, got it. And I understand that, because when I go to the McDonald's in Kandahar, I want it to be like, that looks familiar, everything about it. And so what he was saying to me was like, this just sounded like a beautiful experiment. Like, it's like, I felt like I could breathe. And I've had this kind of conflict for a while, where it's like, sometimes you work with like exceptionally creative people who actually aren't all that creative, because they don't think outside of what could be outside. They're like, nah, don't do that. We don't do that. That's not the kind of thing that we do. And my mind goes into all these different directions. It's like, well, who is the we of which you speak? And am I part of that we? And should I be part of that we? And could I maybe, just for the sake of the experiment, see what it's like to be an unwe? I'm gonna, you know what? I know that you guys have been into this disco, but I'm gonna play down at CBGB's, and it's gonna sound like shit. And there's definitely not gonna be 4 on the floor. You're not, you can't possibly dance to this. All you can do is throw yourself around like a bunch of drunken lunatics and punch each other in the face. That's not happening at Studio 54. And I don't know why we're doing it, but it feels like, let's just try this, see what happens. And so I think about this, in this context, and Patrick and I were talking about it, and like literally right now, like, Patrick is doing some comments on this book design that I mentioned earlier. And I'm also in this place of like, where's the CBGB's kind of expression of these ideas? And the simplest thing I sort of imagine is like, I suppose it's a simple, maybe silly spoof, but maybe worth like the exercise, is do what, like what you're saying, Brandon. It's like, do one of those brand sheets that you always see on the page, like Google, Uber brand guidelines, and you'll come up with that page. And there's always the red X over the drop shadow and the sparkles and the inner glow. And just suppose you'll like, see where you can take this. The only thing that you shouldn't change is the name. It's always Uber or whatever. It's always Near Future Laboratory. And just see what people do. And I get why people want that consistency at one level, but I'm also just curious, like, what happens if you just kind of stray off a little bit? Because, like, I don't know. It just seems like the thing that's going to freak people out, because people are freaked out about evolution. Like, no, I don't know. I don't want to grow this extra part. It looks a little bit gross. but it happens. It's very who's the gruesome guys films that I can't watch? Someone brought this up at some point. Existenz. What's his name? Cronenberg. It's the Cronenberg approach to brand design. Ugh. It's
I love that.
It's like melting off of itself. This is not cool. That the E now looks like an anus. Like that's not gonna help us sell rides.
Take care of your butt.
That reminds me of the branding work that was up at lot 2046 for a while, and the person took it all down. But that was just like a mixture of sort of clear brand work and then somebody obviously just fucking around with subsurface scattering and flesh textures. And yeah, fun to go into.
Ugh.
That guy was missing. Vatic. Is he still
Who? What are you talking about?
the founder of Lot 2046?
Oh.
Like went missing last fall.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think it was found, but I don't know. Yeah.
He gave a talk at my school and it was like so weird. He was like, I think he was on shrooms because he was like talking about like I forget what he was talking about. The only thing I remember is that on the Q&A, it was on Zoom, and on the Q&A, he just pretended to be frozen. So he just, stood like this, and like the dean was asking him questions, but he just,
But he wasn't really frozen?
he wasn't, I don't think he was actually frozen. Like he didn't, like it seemed like there was movement, and he was just sitting like this. And like, it was just like the dean asked a question and then he froze, and it was like, 4 minutes felt like 10 minutes. And then the person, the MC or whatever was like, okay, I think we're done here. And then he just goes like, oh, thank you for having me. Call was over.
Wait, who is this guy?
Have you heard of Lot 2046?
Yeah, Vatic Marmeladov. Yeah, that's awesome. I guess that's the new lecture theater diving suit.
It was amazing. I was just
Think if you're on the spot in a board meeting, like a startup founder, and you're like, and they ask you like a question you just can't answer, don't want to, you just like, do the and then think about the answer, and then maybe kill your feed or something. So it looks like you dropped.
I think it's over, the Lot 2046 stuff.
Yeah, like the website sort of makes it sound like there was a need for an apology, but given that he pulls that kind of shit in lectures, then who knows what the real story is. Yeah, I can see that Vatic is missing. I don't know if it got updated.
They're kind of like a very tech. It was like a subscription.
I'm not finding anything. Lot 26. Nothing is
2046.
2046.
Oh.
Yeah, 20.
It's like someone's got a lot that's 26 acres big, and
they're like a hyper tech kind of crypto.
I'm still not finding
subscription service. It's gone. It's disappeared.
There's nothing on the internet.
No,
there'll be in Pinterest.
How could that be?
It's an Instagram.
Yeah.
So he's like this guy, and he made this. He designed some product, and Airbnb bought it from him for like a lot of money, and then he started.
This was like they did futures work for them, for Airbnb, or no? Am I thinking something else? Someone's got to send me a link. Something. I mean, you guys are looking at something on the screen.
I'm looking at Instagram.
They're coming up with like ranch lots.
But he also made like whether he was actually commissioned for it, he made he made trophies for Adult Film Awards and a bunch of stuff for Kanye.
Yes.
And yeah, and again, like I do not know which is sort of real work he was paid to do and which is speculative. Like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if I worked for this person? But it didn't matter. All of the illustration was beautiful enough that it was all grist for the mill for me. It was just like, this is beautiful and weird and gross. I love it.
The like lot 2046 thing was like this. I feel
Is this the clothing thing?
yeah, where you like buy, you subscribe to get like black socks every month for like 0.1 Ethereum, and they just like send you clothes that are all black. And it was like
and I found the Pornhub award that he made. It was just, and it looks like it was the real one. I just on the Cronenberg, it's like, yeah.
Instagram just shut me down. I was like, log in to continue. Speaking of which, did everybody notice that Zuckerberg shut down Meta or whatever?
Wait, what?
Zuckerberg shut down his metaverse or something?
Really?
Yeah,
I
quietly.
just did a mock-up of a wallpaper metaverse guide.
I don't. Does anybody care or is anybody surprised?
I mean, it's kind of fascinating because he's like, I mean, a year ago he was like, we're changing our name because of this thing, and now
Oh,
he's like,
everything. He was all.
But so, I mean, they're still very much involved in building headsets and AR VR. I think I don't know if it's that they've shut down Horizons. Is it?
I don't know. I just saw a headline yesterday in passing about.
Yeah, I think I saw that one as well.
He shut down the metaverse like quietly. So.
Yeah, so I didn't catch in the article what it was that he specifically has shut down in reference to it. I know that they haven't succeeded in making. So there are a few things like Meta actually hasn't succeeded in maintaining interest, particularly in people who have come to their platforms more recently. So people who bought a Quest 1 or a Quest 2, like early on, they like it and they hang out. But then people who have bought Quests in the last year or so are kind of at some level, by definition, less invested in those things, and so that they've been having a harder time sticking with content in the platform. But it's to do with the more fundamental problem that there's nothing to do in VR right now, and people may need a reason to be in there. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, it'll be a reason to be in there once everybody's in there." But it's like, you got to start, man. People need to have a reason to get in the first place, and otherwise it's not going to happen. So that is happening, but yeah, they're still bleeding money into various sort of aspects of it. It's just whether they understand what to do with that as an underlying technology is I think the thing that's in question.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's not really that accessible. I mean, like the cost of that initial set, and then it was kind of heavy, so I got the second set because it was lighter. First set like wrecked my neck, so I haven't actually put either set back on. My son used the other one. He played with his friend. He plays with a friend across town when they're not doing sleepovers and stuff, just so they could be there. But I think you're right there. That's part of that early adopter group. But it's not accessible. I have a friend at IMVU, and he's like, they just dismiss it as like those scuba masks. Like, yeah, nobody's gonna. That's not a market. It's not gonna. There's a limited market, but it's just not gonna last. So I guess I have to tell my buddy who's right about that so far.
Yeah.
At least it's not a revenue generator at this point, it sounds like. But I just think it's just not accessible.
There are many things in Silicon Valley that have never been revenue generators, but they've been business generators. Like the entirety of Uber's business model has been to try to siphon money off of the Saudis in various forms, and just to sort of kick the can down the road in terms of like, oh, we'll have AI or flying taxis or whatever. And like, yeah, what about making money? But because all they are is a regulatory dodge, then yeah. So like there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of money to work on stuff in Silicon Valley that doesn't make money. They don't or the way they make money isn't real, like ads. Like a lot of the companies that sell ads, sometimes big companies accidentally fail to post their their bid for what ads they buy, and then they see that their business doesn't change, and they're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll just stop paying for that one too. So it's a weird place, because there are people who genuinely are deep experts, have devoted 10, 15, 20 years of their lives to understanding these things, but then they turn out to be complete snake oil, and nobody wants to hire them anymore to work on these things until it's their time, until they can get a ticket back aboard the hype train.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, is the timing, right? Which is kind of cool for what we're talking about, because this came up with the incubator a lot, because in Canada we tend to be like very pragmatic about like, show me the money, like where's the revenue. The angel investors are not interested in funding these big, well, maybe one day we'll have enough eyeballs or whatever kind of thing. So they send them to Silicon Valley. Actually, we have an outpost in Silicon Valley for that. So you got one of those, you head on down there. So but yeah, no, point well taken. And it's just that timing, like I've been listening to How I Built This with Guy Raz. I don't know if you guys have come across that. I use it for my class.
It's very avuncular voice.
Yeah.
I could say nothing wrong. Yeah, just wrong.
Anyway, but this is the cast of characters he has on that show is incredible. Like, he said, these are the giants, but it seems like great fodder for like inspiration around writing something. But a lot of them it's like time. But I'm amazed that the last few I've just said it's luck. I was in the right place at the right time. But it's more than luck. I think it's also, they also admitted that it was, I call it mental capital. They got the right people around them. They weren't ashamed to gather people to them, and then did whatever it took. So it was really those ingredients. And then certainly they're at the right moment in history for that particular market to take off. So, but yeah, when you have too much money like Zuck, and well, whatever else he's lacking, I think you end up making those big, huge mistakes like that in business. And so they become a case study for startup incubators.
Yeah.
We sell that.
Yeah.
Steve Blank has this great one he talks about. I forget what company it was, but he said he got fired 3 times that day. But whatever company it was, he was trying to tell them, I found out what the customers want. It wasn't what the boss, wasn't what the CEO was trying to sell. So it was like Silicon Graphics and Floor Wax or something. It was like they were trying to combine computing and graphics in a way that nobody wanted. I'm a fan of Steve Blank's. He was more the pragmatist around lean, what became the MVPs and all that we talked about last week. Yeah. Oh, since we've gotten a little quieter, can you guys tell me what the acronym? Drew has helped me out with my little story there, and he used the acronym MWOW, or what was it? Hang on a sec. And I did the internet search on it, and I was getting like shut down on it. People were using it, but I didn't find it with the acronym. MWOW. I think it sounded like something common that would come up.
That doesn't ring a bell.
What is it?
I'm just look. I got to go back. Oh, where did I drop it? You told me to drop it. Oh, shill. So we have a shill. We went to a private thread. I think you put us. Okay, let me find that again. There's done level 5. So used. He's off now. MWOWM. So M with the word wow, and then M at the end of it. I joked. I said my way or why me. So, is that what that means? Or I don't know. Because we're talking about this future fiction thing that I was writing, and we're taking a shot at for the first time. And thanks also for that support. I've lost Drew here now, but yeah, that's all he said. He didn't define. He wrote back here. It didn't define that. We were talking about MacGuffins, which is perfect.
It could be one that is not going to be explained throughout the entire script then. Because I don't know.
Interesting. Okay, I thought I was just, wow, I'm really out of it if I don't know what the acronym means. But
I'm trying to see if it's like in what
me
you
too.
wrote, but I don't. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. No, I didn't use. Yeah, I think I would, if I used an acronym, I used to get slammed for that because I'd use acronyms, as an engineer and for shorthand, and of course with I have this anxiety and all this stuff. So I'm like, why aren't people following along? Anyway, it was like the acronyms and it were not helping. So now I write them all out very clearly, but it's just trying to think if I could find where he used it in the thread, and then that question was the primary.
I see it. I don't know.
Um,
One strategy is to pull back on the futuristic MWOW cube.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You can read it too. Good. So yeah, there it is. Futuristic ML cube. One way is to pull back on the M. So there must be something to do with like future tech, and you're trying to make normalized, maybe. I don't know.
There's a Japanese Facebook group that has MWOW Designer Brainstorming League. And then they have a
Spell out what it means. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's one of those acronyms that actually doesn't mean anything. It's just become a, oh, well, okay, good. Well, I feel better. Thank you. Just because it's not like an obvious thing. Like,
It
oh,
is,
yeah, that
but
means
the
this.
concept is kind of interesting. If I'm understanding what you're describing, maybe just try describing it again, and maybe we can make up a new idiom for it.
For what in my story, what I'm trying to describe?
Yeah,
I
guess maybe first of all, how did you come across it?
The idea for the
The term was that
Drew we
Drew
went
mentioned.
to
He just wrote it.
Drew, yeah, he just wrote it, and when we went off to a little side strat called Stun Level 5, because they said, like, he said, how hard do you want me to hit you on my
Oh,
crit?
yeah,
And
right,
I said,
right.
well, Stun Level 5, and I'm assuming he's using a class 2 phaser, 10 settings on each. But anyway, that then he just sort of put that in there, and then I joke with him back. I said, I don't know what that means. I
Yeah,
got to the age
it's-
now where I don't care if I don't know. I just ask now. I don't like try to
Yeah, of
pretend like
course.
I know stuff or anything.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yes, I know.
Or, yes, I'm very aware of the latest lingo that the kids use these days. But anyway, so that's where it came up, and it's just because this cube I have in that story, if you looked at it, and thanks for your encouragement there again, Jillian. But that had. It's a pretty super futuristic cube, right? It does. I'm like, I'm going to use the most platonic shape, and of course I had to stick in the dimension of a hockey puck in the story. So because I was going to make it a hockey puck, and I'm like, it's a cylinder. It looks too much like a smart speaker, so I'll make it a cube. And then it does all these crazy things, and so it absorbs its surroundings literally and figuratively. And then he said, but then we were like, well, did we get caught up in the tech, or did we get sidetracked? How is that? Because I think that's what it seems to me. It means the MWOW, meaning like I looked at the WOW part thinking, oh, I'm like a MacGuffin's supposed to not really matter to anything. It's just kind of like it's an artifact that is there that people kind of want, but it has no meaning intrinsically itself. And then but because this one's so super high tech, futuristic or whatever, I was trying to like make it seem normal, like it's just, well, but still I'm admitting that it's high tech in the story, like it's a new thing in the story. I don't know. Anyway, not sure what he meant by it. It's just pull back on the futuristic end. So maybe it was just he thought it was too distracting, maybe, or it was just a suggestion to think about that if it was too distracting to this core part of the story, if I'm focused on agency and purpose for
I think it's a cosmic superior computer that is a function of that's in the work of Vaughn Bodie or Bowdy, and an American underground cartoonist and illustrator known for his character Cheech Wizard. So that's my best guess. It looks like there's a fandom page that has a quote about the MWOW. The supercomputer MWOW is composed of 100,000 connected and tormented brains that thoughtfully think their thoughts, watching eternally, being and happening while orbiting endlessly in the frosty known night on the fringe of the galaxy. A god unto itself, the MWOW was programmed to think all possible thoughts even if sometimes that means forgetting who it is.
Nice. Okay.
And it says Vaughn
that
Bodhi.
reference makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. That makes huge sense. So this could be a Japanese term, and I'm thinking because this reality check episode I was listening to, the AI, the artificial super intelligence, right? That's what they're talking about. That's sort of like when's that going to happen? So that may be that was an expression of that. Cool. Thank you for that,
Yeah.
Randall, again. Your help too.
Yeah, no problem.
Right, I gotta jump, guys. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dallas. I'm gonna dig in a little more into what he's doing there. Green pages
Yeah.
and stuff.